An empty coffee shop, an exhausted woman counting coins that are never enough, 12 hours on her feet, feet burning, thinking about the late rent and her daughter's medicine. Then a man enters who seems to have nothing, unkempt beard, dirty clothes, hands shaking. He sits in silence, wanting to disappear. The manager yells at him to leave, but she stops him. She serves him a bowl of hot soup without him asking. When he finishes, the man pulls out 5 wrinkled dollars, everything he has. But she gives them back and tells him something that destroys him inside. Here, guests do not pay for kindness. What she doesn't know is that this man just changed her life forever. Like this, if this touched your soul, it is more than a click. It is a silent hug between those who know what it is to suffer. Comment how you think this story is going to end, and if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing, but for us, it means everything. Thank you for being here. The rain hit the glass of the coffee. Shop with a violence that seemed to want to break it. New York slept under a blanket of black water and cutting wind, and the streets were empty as if the whole world had surrendered to the storm. Inside the small establishment, the fluorescent lights flickered with fatigue, just like Sarah Reyes. Her feet hurt with every step. 12 hours on her feet, 12 hours cleaning tables, serving coffee, enduring looks from impatient customers, and the constant bad mood of Jack, the manager. Her hands, cracked by hot water and cheap detergent, trembled as she wiped the damp cloth over the stainless steel counter. The light blue uniform was stained with grease and coffee, and the white apron had stopped being white many hours ago. Sarah looked at the clock. 11:30. In half an hour they would close, and she could finally take the night bus that would take her to the small apartment where Lily, her 6-year-old daughter, slept under the care of Mrs. Miller, the neighbor from the 3rd floor who charged $10 per night. $10 that Sarah didn't always have, but that she paid with religious punctuality because she couldn't afford to lose that help. Mentally, she reviewed the bills. The rent was due in 5 days, $43 were missing. The cough syrup for Lily cost $18. The electricity bill was late. The new uniform they asked for at school was impossible for now. Each number was one more stone in the weight she carried on her shoulders. Sarah, clean. "To the back table before you leave," Jack grumbled from the cash register, without even looking at her. She didn't answer. She never answered. She simply obeyed, walking toward the table where a lonely customer had left a half-drunk cup of coffee and a plate with toast crumbs. As she gathered the dishes, she heard the thunder of the door opening against the wind. A man entered, staggering. Sarah stopped, dishes in her hands, and observed him. He was soaked from head to toe. Water dripped from his dark and dirty clothes, forming puddles on the freshly mopped floor. His grey beard was disheveled, grown for days or perhaps weeks. His hands trembled visibly, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, as if every fibre of his body was on the verge of collapse. His eyes, sunken in dark sockets, looked at the floor with the shame of one who has learned to become invisible. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't say anything. He simply walked toward the far corner table, the one next to, the old radiator that barely heated, and sat down with slow and careful movements, as if every gesture required all his concentration. Jack saw him immediately. His eyes narrowed with disgust. "Hey!" he shouted, coming out from behind the counter. "This isn't a shelter, out now." The man didn't look up. He kept his gaze fixed on his own hands, which rested on the wet table. "Are you listening to me?" Jack advanced toward him with heavy steps. "I don't want bums here. You're going to scare away the customers." "There are no customers," Sarah said in a low but clear voice. Jack turned toward her with an expression of surprise and irritation. "Excuse me?" "There are no customers," Sarah repeated, looking him directly in the eyes. "Only him. And it's raining. I don't give a damn if it's raining. This isn't charity. If I let him stay, tomorrow 10 more will come. Leave him alone, Jack. Don't tell me what I have to do, Sarah. You're not the owner. Neither are you." The silence that followed was tense, charged with electricity. Jack clenched his jaw, but Sarah did not back down. She knew she could lose her job. She knew she needed every dollar she earned. But there was something about that man sitting in the corner, something in the way he shrank, as if he wanted to disappear, that touched a deep fiber inside her. "If someone is bothered because a hungry man is trying to get warm," Sarah said with a firmness she didn't know she possessed, "then they aren't customers I want to serve." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. He looked at Sarah, then at the man, then back at her. Finally he snorted, turned around and returned to the counter, muttering curses. Sarah left the dirty dishes in the sink and walked toward the kitchen. Her hands moved with automatic speed. She took a large bowl, filled it with chicken broth that remained in the dinner pot, cut 2 thick slices of bread, and placed it all on a tray. When she returned to the dining room, she approached the corner table and put the plate in front of the man. He looked up for the first time. His eyes were a light grey, almost transparent, and in them was a mixture of surprise, shame, and something Sarah couldn't quite identify. It seemed like a long time since anyone had looked at him directly. I don't have money," he said with a raspy voice, as if he hadn't used it in days. "I didn't ask you if you had any," Sarah replied simply. "I can't accept this. It's already done." Sarah dragged the chair closer to the radiator, making the insufficient heat reach him a little better. Then she returned to the counter without waiting for thanks. The man looked at the plate. Steam rose in thin spirals, filling the air with the scent of thyme and pepper. He took the spoon with trembling hands and began to eat. Every bite seemed to be both a relief and a torture, as if his body had forgotten what it was to feel fed. Sarah didn't watch him. She continued cleaning, tidying, preparing, everything to close. But she was aware of his presence, of every silent movement he made. When the man finished, he reached into the inner pocket of his soaked jacket. His fingers pulled out a wrinkled $5 bill, damp and stained. He left it on the table carefully, as if it were the most valuable thing he possessed. Probably it was. Sarah saw the bill. $5. The equivalent of half an hour of work, half an hour closer to the rent, 3 bus trips, almost a third of Lily's syrup. She walked toward the table, took the bill delicately and returned to where he was sitting. She leaned in slightly and put the money back into the open palm of his hand, closing his trembling fingers around the paper. "Here," she said with a soft but unbreakable voice, "guests do not pay for kindness." The words fell on Arthur Calloway like an invisible weight. He felt something inside his chest break and reconstruct at the same time. For weeks he had walked through the coldest streets of New York, disguised as what he had never been, looking for something he didn't know existed. He had entered elegant restaurants where they had thrown him out with violence. He had asked for help in luxury hotels where security guards had pushed him into the street like trash. He had looked into the eyes of hundreds of people, and in each of them he had seen the same thing: contempt, indifference, fear. But in the eyes of this woman in a stained uniform and tired feet, he saw humanity. He said, nothing more. He couldn't. He stood up slowly, nodded once and went back out into the storm, taking with him the warmth of something that money had never been able to buy him. Sarah watched him walk away in the rain until he disappeared into the darkness of the night. Jack turned off the exterior lights at 12 sharp. Sarah took her worn-out bag, put on the thin coat that didn't protect from the cold, and went out into the wet street. The rain had subsided to a fine drizzle, but the wind was still cutting. She walked the 3 blocks to the night bus stop, thinking about Lily, about the bills, about the man who had just left. She didn't know that tonight everything had changed. She didn't know that this man would not sleep peacefully again, thinking about what he had just witnessed. She didn't know that she had just planted a seed that would grow into a tree whose branches would cover her whole life. Arthur Calloway returned to his mansion on the outskirts of New York at 2 in the morning. The security guards at the entrance did not recognize him at first, and only when he spoke, when his authoritative voice pierced the disguise of dirty clothes and unkempt beard, did they step aside with expressions of confusion. "Mr. Calloway, we didn't know that." "It doesn't matter," Arthur cut in, passing by them without further explanation. He went up the marble stairs to his room, took off the wet clothes, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at him was that of a 68-year-old man who had built an empire but lost something essential along the way. He had erected buildings in 20 countries. He had turned technology into money and money into power. But when he looked into his own eyes, he only saw emptiness. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. Miller had given him the news in his private office, with the same professional coldness with which a change in the stock market is announced. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. It has metastasized to the liver and lungs. We can try palliative chemotherapy, but being honest, Arthur, we are talking about months. 4, maybe 6 if you're lucky. Arthur had listened to those words without expression, nodding as if they were discussing a contract. Only when he got home, Only when he closed the door of his study did he allow the weight of that sentence to crush him. He had spent his whole life accumulating, building, conquering, and now time, the only thing he had never been able to buy, was slipping through his fingers. He decided to tell his children that same night. He summoned them to the library, the place where he had always made important decisions. Adam arrived first, impeccable in his Italian suit, checking his phone with fast fingers. Eleanor appeared 5 minutes later, irritated because she had to cancel a dinner. "What is so urgent, Dad?" Eleanor asked, dropping her designer bag onto the leather sofa. Arthur looked at them, his son and his daughter. He had raised them to be strong, competitive, relentless. He had taught them to win, to never show weakness, to see the world as a chessboard where only victory mattered. Now, looking at them, he wondered if he had created something beautiful or simply reproduced his own coldness. "I have cancer," he said without preamble. "Terminal. I have a few months left." The silence that followed lasted barely 3 seconds. "Have you consulted a second opinion?" Adam asked, putting away the phone. "We can bring specialists from Houston." "From Berlin." "I already did. It is definitive." Elena sat down, crossing her legs with automatic elegance. "How much time exactly?" 4 to 6 months. "Then we need to talk about the shares," Adam said. "The board of directors cannot know that you are weakened. We need to transfer control gradually, make it look like a planned transition. Have you already spoken with the lawyers?" Arthur felt something freeze inside his chest. "Is that all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" Adam looked at him with genuine confusion. "You taught me to be practical. This is a crisis that must be managed." "And you, Elena?" His daughter sighed, as if the question were an unnecessary nuisance. "I need to know about the trust funds and the properties in France. I want to make sure everything is legally protected before things get complicated. Not one question about pain, not one word about fear, not a single gesture of comfort." Arthur had trained them to be efficient machines, and that was exactly what he had achieved. He stood up without saying anything more and left the library, leaving them discussing papers and percentages. That night he made the decision. He needed to know if there was something real beyond money, if selfless kindness existed, or if everything in this world had a price. He took off the brand-name suits, put away the expensive watches, left behind the credit cards and the phone. He dressed in old clothes bought at thrift stores and went out to walk, through a New York he had never known, and the world showed him its true face. At the Plaza Hotel, where he had held dozens of business dinners, the doorman pushed him when he tried to enter to use the bathroom. At the restaurant The Terrace, where he had a permanent table reserved, the maitre d' called security. In every elegant place, in every polished and expensive space, he was treated like trash, until that rainy night in a nearly empty coffee shop, where a tired woman gave him the little she had without asking for anything in return. Arthur showered for 40 minutes, letting the hot water take away the filth of the streets, but not the weight of what he had discovered. When he came out, he dressed in his usual clothes, took the phone, and called his lawyer. "I need to see you tomorrow, first thing, and bring everything necessary to rewrite my will." The alarm clock went off at 6 in the morning with a shrill beep that Sarah silenced before it woke Lily. She got up in the darkness of the small apartment, feeling her way to the kitchen. The place was barely 400 square feet, a room where Lily slept, a sofa bed in the living room where she slept, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a bathroom with cracked tiles. She prepared coffee in the Italian coffee maker she had inherited from her grandmother, the only object of sentimental value she possessed. While the coffee bubbled, she looked out the window. New York was waking up slowly under a grey sky, still damp from the previous night's rain. She thought about the man from the coffee shop. There was something in his eyes, something that didn't fit his appearance. It wasn't the empty look of someone who has lost all hope, but something different, as if he were looking for something specific and had found it. She shook her head. Probably she would never see him again. The city was full of stories that crossed once and never again. At 6:30, she woke Lily gently. "Good morning, my sunshine." The girl opened, her eyes large and dark like her mother's, and smiled with that simple joy that only children possess. "Can I wear the pink sweater today?" "It's in the wash, honey. The blue one is clean. But blue is for boys. Blue is for whoever wants to wear it, and it looks beautiful on you." Sarah helped her dress, prepared her breakfast, milk with cocoa and toast with jam, brushed her curly hair until it shone, and packed her lunch in a plastic lunchbox with a cheese sandwich and an apple. It was the same every day, but Sarah made sure that Lily never felt she lacked anything. "Are you working again tonight, Mommy?" "Yes, but Mrs. Miller is going to be with you. She likes you very much." "I like you too, right?" Sarah knelt in front of her daughter, taking her face in her hands. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. Don't ever forget that." Lily hugged her tightly, and Sarah felt that despite everything, despite the unpaid bills and double shifts, she had done something right. She walked her to school 8 blocks away. They couldn't afford the bus twice a day. Sarah greeted the other mothers at the gate, women like her, hard-working, tired, proud. Lily ran into her class, and Sarah returned to the apartment to sleep for 3 hours before her afternoon shift. Sleep did not come easily. Worries haunted her even on the pillow. The rent, the syrup, the electric bill. Each number was a knot in her stomach. But finally, exhausted, she fell asleep. 12 noon. She was back on her feet, dressing in her clean uniform, tying her hair in a tight bun. She took the bus to the coffee shop and arrived 15 minutes before her shift, as always. Jack was at the register, counting coins with a bitter expression. "You're early," he grunted without looking up. "I'm always early. Last night you got too smart." Sarah put on her apron without responding. "One of these days, it's going to cost you your job, Sarah. You can't go around giving free food to any bum." He was a human being, not a bum. "To me, it's the same." "I know," Sarah said in a low voice. "That's why you'll never be more than a bitter manager." Jack looked up sharply, but before he could respond, the first lunch customers entered, and the day began with its relentless rhythm. Sarah moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, smiling at customers, memorizing orders, cleaning plates. Her feet hurt, but she was already used to the pain. It was part of life. At 4 in the afternoon, during a moment of calm, she sat in the back room to eat a sandwich she had brought from home. She checked her phone and saw a message from Mrs. Miller. "Lily is fine. We did homework." She replied with a heart and put away the phone. The night shift began at 6 and would extend until midnight. 6 more hours. She could do it. She could always do it. What Sarah didn't know was that, at that very moment, in a luxurious office on the other side of the city, Arthur Calloway was signing documents that would change her life forever. The law firm of Miller & Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass building in the financial district of New York. Arthur entered at 9 in the morning, greeted the receptionist briefly, and went directly to the private office of Charles Miller, his trusted lawyer for 30 years. Charles was waiting for him with fresh coffee and a worried expression. "Arthur, I got your message. Are you sure about this?" "Completely." "Do you understand the implications? Your children are going to—" "I know exactly what they are going to do," Arthur interrupted. "That's why I need this to be unbreakable. Not a crack, not a legal loophole. I want it to be impossible to contest." Charles leaned back in his leather chair, studying the face of his client and friend. "Tell me what happened." Arthur told him everything: the diagnosis, the reaction of his children, the weeks walking disguised through the streets, the hotels that kicked him out, the restaurants that treated him like trash, and finally the coffee shop, the woman, Sarah. "She gave me back $5, Charles. $5 that she probably needed more than I ever have in my whole life. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't expect anything. She just saw a human being cold and hungry and acted." Charles listened in silence, and when Arthur finished, he let out a long sigh. "So, you want to leave it all to her? Everything? Arthur, understand me. I admire what you want to do, but this woman, you don't even know her. What if the money destroys her? What if she becomes the same thing you criticize in your children?" "She won't." "How can you be sure?" Arthur leaned forward with an intensity that made Charles back up slightly in his seat. "Because she already had the opportunity to keep those $5. No one would have judged her. No one would have known. But she gave them back to me. Character is not formed with money, Charles. It is revealed. And she already showed me hers. And Adam and Elena, leave them enough so they can't claim abandonment. Personal items, mementos, but nothing more." Charles took a long sip of coffee, then nodded slowly. "I will need a week to draft everything properly. We have to anticipate every legal argument they might use. Mental incapacity, undue influence, fraud. Make it airtight, armored, unbreakable. Are you going to say anything to her? To Sarah? No. Let her discover it when nothing can be changed. Anymore. When it is irrevocable. During the following days, Arthur watched Sarah from a distance. He hired a discreet private investigator, not to look for scandals, but to confirm what he already knew. The reports arrived one after another. Single mother, no record. Tireless worker, loved in her neighborhood, known for helping others, even when she barely could help herself. A week later, Charles presented him with the will. 120 pages of impenetrable legal language. Clauses. Within clauses, protections over protections. It's perfect, Arthur said after reading it completely. It's a fortress. But Arthur, your children are not going to accept this without a fight. Let them fight. They won't win. He signed every page with his name, conscious that every stroke of ink was a final act of redemption. He couldn't undo the past. He couldn't recover the years he had spent teaching his children the wrong values, but he could ensure that his fortune ended up in the hands of someone who understood that money was responsibility, not power. When he finished, he kept a copy in the safe at his house and gave another to Charles with precise instructions. When I die, I want you to find her personally. Don't send an assistant. You. Explain everything to her and make sure she understands that she can refuse if she wants to. Refuse? Arthur, you are leaving her billions, and if she doesn't want them, I will donate everything to charity, but it has to be her choice, as it was that night in the coffee shop. 2 weeks later, Arthur was admitted to the hospital to begin palliative chemotherapy. The doctors were clear. It wouldn't cure him. It would only give him a little more time. He accepted the treatment not out of fear of dying, but because he needed to make sure everything was in order before the end. Adam and Elena visited him the first day, more out of obligation than affection. They sat by his bed with uncomfortable expressions, looking at the tubes and machines as if they were offensive. How do you feel? Elena asked, checking her phone while she spoke. Tired. The doctors say the treatment could give you 6 more months, Adam said. That gives us time to organize the transition. It's already organized. Something in Arthur's tone made both of them look up. What do you mean? My will is updated and finalized. Everything is in order. Can we see it? Adam asked immediately. Dad, we have a right. You have no right until I die. And when that happens, it will be read before the lawyer, not before. Eleanor stood up abruptly, dropping her bag. What are you plotting? Nothing that concerns you now. We are your children. Exactly, Arthur interrupted with a tired but firm voice. You are my children, not my owners. The money is mine to do with as I see fit, and I have already decided. They left angry, leaving a silence that seemed peaceful to Arthur. For the first time in weeks, he slept without nightmares. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her life knowing nothing. The days melted into each other in a relentless routine. Wake up, prepare Lily, work, pick up Lily, sleep, repeat. Money remained scarce. The rent was paid 2 days late, using money borrowed from another waitress. Lily's syrup was bought halfway, half the recommended dose stretched to make it last twice as long. But there were small joys. Lily got an A in math. Mrs. Miller gave her a dress that her granddaughter no longer used. Jack, surprisingly, gave her Sunday off without docking her pay. One night while cleaning tables, a regular customer, Mr. Thompson, an old man who came every Thursday, left her a $20 tip along with a note. For your daughter, God bless her. Sarah read the note 3 times, eyes damp, and kept the money carefully. $20 meant the school uniform Lily needed. They meant dignity. What Sarah didn't know was that Adam and Elena had started their own investigation. They hired private detectives to follow their father during his final weeks before the hospital, looking for any evidence that he was being manipulated or deceived, and they found something. Photographs of Arthur entering the coffee shop disguised, images of Sarah serving him food, a trail of transactions that showed that Arthur had been investigating this woman. Who the hell is she? Elena asked, studying the photos in her lawyer's office. Sarah Reyes, 32 years old, single mother, works in a coffee shop, nothing special. The detective responded. There has to be something else, Adam insisted. No one leaves a fortune to a waitress by chance. Unless Dad is senile, Elena murmured. Or manipulated, Adam added. They began to plant seeds of doubt. They called members of the board of directors, hinting that their father was making irrational decisions due to the illness. They contacted doctors to get psychological evaluations. They built a case, brick by brick, preparing for the battle they knew would come. But Arthur had anticipated every move. Charles Miller had included previous psychological evaluations in the file, testimonies from multiple doctors confirming his lucidity, and video recordings of Arthur explaining his reasons with perfect clarity. "Let them try whatever they want," Arthur told Charles during one of his visits to the hospital. "They won't win. They are hiring the best litigation firm in the country. Let them hire every lawyer in the country. The truth is simple. The money is mine. My mind is clear and my decision is final." Arthur's deterioration was rapid. In 6 weeks he lost 30 pounds. His skin took on a greyish tone that no treatment could disguise, but his mind remained sharp as crystal, something that deeply frustrated his children. Elena tried a different approach. She visited the hospital with her best performance of a worried daughter. "Dad, we are worried about you," she said, sitting by the bed with a sympathetic expression. "You've been under a lot of pressure. The diagnosis, the treatment. We don't want you to make decisions you might regret." Arthur looked at her with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "What decisions are you talking about, Elena?" About your will. We've heard rumors." "What rumors?" "That you are considering drastic changes. That there are people who are perhaps influencing you." "People?" Arthur almost smiled. "Or a specific person?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You hired investigators. I saw them. They aren't as discreet as they think." Elena's mask fell, replaced by cold anger. "If you are going to leave our money to a stranger, we have a right to know why. It's not your money. It's mine. And that stranger showed me more humanity in 5 minutes than you have in a lifetime." "We are your family." "You are my blood," Arthur corrected. "But family is built with actions, not with DNA." Elena stood up, trembling with contained rage. "This isn't going to end like this. We will fight, lose, learn." After Elena left, Arthur closed his eyes. Every breath was an effort. The pain was constant now, barely contained by the morphine flowing through the IV lines, but there was something stronger than the pain, the certainty that he had done the right thing. Meanwhile, at the coffee shop, Sarah received an unexpected visit. An elegant woman in her 40s entered during the afternoon shift. Her expensive clothes contrasted violently with the humble atmosphere of the place. She sat at a table and ordered only a coffee. It was Elena. Sarah didn't recognize her, of course. She simply served her the coffee with the same professional kindness she showed all customers. Eleanor watched her with evaluating eyes, looking for signs of what? Manipulation? Cunning? Greed? What she saw was a tired woman serving tables with mechanical efficiency, smiling at customers who barely looked at her, cleaning plates with cracked hands. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary. "Anything else?" Sarah asked when she saw the cup was empty. "No," Elena replied curtly. "How much is it?" $2.50. Elena left a $5 bill on the table and stood up without waiting for change. When she reached the door, she turned one last time. Sarah had already cleared the table and was attending to another customer, completely oblivious to the scrutiny. Elena left with more questions than answers. That night, when Sarah returned home, she found Lily awake, sitting on the sofa with Mrs. Miller. "Her throat hurt," the neighbor explained. "I gave her a little honey with lemon." Sarah felt panic tighten her chest. She touched Lily's forehead. "Hot. How long has she been like this?" "An hour, more or less." Sarah took Lily in her arms. The girl was burning up. She looked at the syrup bottle on the kitchen shelf, almost empty. There was no money for more until Friday, and it was Tuesday. "I'm going to take her to the clinic," she said, wrapping Lily in a blanket. "At this hour, it's closed." Then to the ER. Mrs. Miller put a hand on her arm. "Sarah, the ER will charge you. You know that." "I don't care." She took the night bus with Lily huddled against her chest. The girl trembled with fever, murmuring nonsensical words. At the hospital, they waited 3 hours before an exhausted doctor saw them. Bacterial pharyngitis. She needed antibiotics. The prescription cost $38. Sarah had $23 in her pocket. Can I pay half now and the rest tomorrow?" she asked at the hospital pharmacy. The pharmacist, a young man with glasses, looked at her with compassion. "I'm sorry. I have to charge the full amount." Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. Lily coughed in her arms, small and fragile and dependent on her, and she couldn't even buy her the medicine she needed. "Please," she whispered. "My daughter is sick." The pharmacist hesitated. Then, with a quick movement, he reached into his own pocket and pulled out $15. "This didn't come from me, understood?" Sarah took the money with trembling hands. Thank you. I'll pay you back." "I don't want you to pay me back. Just take care of your little girl." That night, while Lily finally slept without fever, with the antibiotics doing their job, Sarah sat on the sofa and cried. She cried from exhaustion, from fear, from the humiliation of not being able to take care of her own daughter. But she also cried from gratitude, because in a cruel world, there were still people like that pharmacist who chose kindness. She didn't know that, at that very moment, in a private hospital on the other side of the city, Arthur Calloway was also crying. He cried because the pain was unbearable. He cried because the morphine was no longer enough. But above all, he cried because he knew he had days, not weeks, left, and he needed to make sure his last act in this world meant something. Arthur died on a Tuesday morning at 6:17, with the sun just peeking over the horizon. Charles Miller was by his bed, holding his hand. Adam and Elena had been notified, but arrived 40 minutes later, when it was already too late to say goodbye, if they had even wanted to. The funeral was exactly what Arthur had feared, a spectacle. Hundreds of people who barely knew him came to pay their respects, not to the man, but to the empire he had built. The speeches were empty, full of words about visionary and leader, but no one mentioned kindness. No one spoke of humanity. Adam and Elena received condolences with appropriately sad expressions, but their eyes were already calculating, measuring, planning. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following day. That night, Charles Miller drove through the streets of New York to a neighborhood he had never visited. He found the building where Sarah lived, went up the worn stairs to the 3rd floor, and knocked on the door. Sarah opened with Lily on her hip. She had been preparing dinner, and the smell of soup filled the small apartment. "Ms. Reyes?" Charles asked. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Charles Miller. I'm a lawyer. Can we talk?" Sarah's heart raced. Lawyers never brought good news. "Have I done something wrong?" "No, ma'am, quite the opposite, but I need to talk to you about an important matter. May I come in?" Sarah let him in, nervous, placing Lily on the sofa with her crayons. Charles looked around the apartment. Clean, but worn, humble but dignified, exactly what he expected. "Ms. Reyes, do you remember a man who visited the coffee shop where you work approximately 2 months ago?" It was a stormy night. The man looked homeless. The memory hit like a bolt of lightning. The gray eyes, the trembling hands, the wrinkled $5. "Yeah, I remember him. I gave him something to eat." "Why? Is he okay?" Charles took a deep breath. That man was Arthur Calloway, one of the richest businessmen in America, and he passed away yesterday. Sarah blinked, confused. I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" "Ms. Reyes, Mr. Calloway changed his will after that night, and he named you his sole heir." The words made no sense. Sarah heard them, processed them, but her brain refused to accept them. "Heir? No, there must be a mistake. I only gave him a bowl of soup. There is no mistake. Mr. Calloway left very specific instructions. He left everything to you. His properties, his shares, his investments, everything." "How much is everything?" Charles pulled a document from his briefcase. "Approximately $3.2 billion. The apartment seemed to tilt. Sarah sat down before she fell. That can't be real." "It is completely real. Here is the certified will. Here are the psychological evaluations that confirm Mr. Calloway was in full use of his mental faculties when he signed it. Here are the bank documents." "Why me? I didn't know him. I didn't ask him for anything." "Exactly because of that, Ms. Reyes. Because you didn't ask him for anything. Because when the world treated him like trash, you treated him like a person. Because you gave him back $5 that you probably needed. That proved something to him that his own money could never buy. Real character. Sarah looked at Lily, who was coloring quietly, unaware that her life had just changed forever. And his children. They will receive personal items, but nothing more. That's not right. They are his family. They were informed, and as we anticipated, they are preparing a legal battle. They are going to try to declare the will invalid. They are going to investigate you, Ms. Reyes. They are going to look for anything they can use against you. Fear replaced surprise. I have nothing to hide. I know Arthur also knew that. That's why he made the will unbreakable. But I need to warn you. This is going to be difficult. The next few months are going to be intense. Are you prepared? Sarah thought about Lily, about the late rent, about the unpaid bills, about every night she had cried wondering how she was going to survive another month. And then she thought about that man with grey eyes who had entered the coffee shop trembling with cold. Can I refuse? Charles nodded. It is your right. If you sign these papers, everything goes to a charitable foundation that Mr. Calloway specified as an alternative. And if I accept, then you become one of the wealthiest women in the country, with all the responsibility that entails. Sarah closed her eyes. She could hear Lily's soft breathing, the ticking of the cheap clock on the wall, the distant sound of traffic. Her whole life fit in 400 square feet, and now they were offering her the world. I need time to think. Of course. Take all the time you need. But both knew that time was a luxury she didn't have. The official reading of the will took place in Arthur's private library, the same place where he had announced his illness to his children. Adam and Elena arrived with their respective lawyers, teams of 3 people each, dressed in dark suits that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. Sarah arrived alone, wearing the best dress she had, a navy blue one she had bought second-hand for a wedding years ago. She sat in a padded chair that was probably worth more than her entire apartment, hands clenched in her lap. Elena looked at her with thinly veiled contempt. Adam didn't even recognize her. Focused on the documents his lawyer was reviewing, Charles Miller began the reading with a firm and clear voice. I, Arthur Calloway, in full use of my mental faculties, declare this will as my last wish. The first paragraphs were legal formalities. Then came the substantial part. To my son Adam, I leave my collection of antique cufflinks, which belonged to my father. May they remind him that value is not in gold, but in legacy. Adam went pale. Cufflinks? Only cufflinks? To my daughter. Helena, I leave the portrait of her mother, painted by Velázquez. May it remind her of the kindness that once existed in this family. Elena stood up abruptly. This is a joke. Sit down, please, Charles said with professional calm. I am not finished yet. The rest of my estate, including all properties, shares, investments, bank accounts, and other assets, I leave in its entirety to Ms. Sarah Reyes. Eleanor's scream cut through the air like a knife. This is fraud, manipulation. That woman tricked him. Your father was evaluated by 3 different psychiatrists, Charles responded. All certified his complete mental lucidity. I don't care. Elena pointed an accusing finger at Sarah. She manipulated him. She used who knows what methods to— I didn't even know who he was, Sarah exclaimed, finally finding her voice. I only gave him a plate of food. That's all. Liar, Adam spat. No one gives away $3 billion for a plate of soup. Charles closed the document with a dry snap. Mr. Calloway also left a letter. Would you like to hear it? He opened a sealed envelope and began to read in a measured voice. To whoever reads this, I built an empire, but I failed as a father. I taught my children to be strong, but not to be good. I showed them how to win, but not how to matter. When I told them I was dying, they asked me about shares and inheritances. Not a single one asked if I was afraid, if I felt pain, if I needed company. I decided to see what was beyond, my world of privilege, and the world showed me its truth. I was rejected, humiliated, treated like trash, until a tired woman with aching feet and bills to pay saw me as a human being. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't expect anything. She just acted with kindness because it was the right thing to do. In that moment I understood that I had found what my children never were, someone with true character. This will is my last lesson. Money does not buy humanity. It only reveals it. Sarah already showed me hers. Now I want the world to see what she does with this responsibility. And to Adam and Elena, I loved you, but I did not prepare you to be good people. That is my greatest failure. I hope someday you understand that you lost something more valuable than money. You lost the chance to be human." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena trembled with rage. Adam clenched his fists until the knuckles turned white. "We will contest this," Adam's lawyer said. "We have grounds." "To claim undue influence?" "Try it," Charles replied calmly. "Every clause was reviewed by the best jurists in the country. Every evaluation was performed by independent professionals. Every detail was anticipated." "We'll see you in court," Elena threatened, taking her bag. "We'll be waiting for you there." When Adam and Elena left like hurricanes, leaving a trail of threats and curses, Sarah remained seated, paralyzed. Charles waited for the door to close before speaking. They did just as Arthur predicted. "Can I really lose all this?" Sarah asked with a small voice. "Not if the will is solid, and it is. But prepare yourself, Ms. Reyes. The battle is just beginning." The lawyers for Adam and Elena filed the lawsuit 3 days later. They alleged mental incapacity, undue influence, and fraud. They hired investigators who followed Sarah's every step. Journalists began calling her, hounding her outside the coffee shop, chasing Lily to school. The headlines were cruel. Waitress or scammer? The suspicious inheritance? Family fights for justice against manipulator. Sarah stopped going out. She asked for leave at work. She kept Lily at home. The apartment became a prison of fear and confusion. The phone rang constantly with unknown numbers. Threatening letters arrived in the mailbox. One morning she found painted on her door, "Thief." She cried for the first time since the reading of the will, not for the money, but for the price she was paying. Charles Miller tripled. Her security hired bodyguards and moved Sarah and Lily temporarily to a discreet hotel. "They can't do this to me," she whispered one night. "I only helped a hungry man." "I know," Charles responded. "But they see billions, not kindness. To them, you are an obstacle, nothing more." The trial began 2 months later. The room was full of reporters, curious people, and expensive lawyers. Adam and Elena sat at the front, with expressions of virtuous indignation. Sarah sat on the other side, in the blue dress that she had now washed so many times it was starting to fray. The lawyer for the Calloway siblings was a shark named James Vance, known for never losing. His strategy was brutal and simple: destroy Sarah's credibility. "Ms. Reyes," he began with a honeyed voice, "is it true that you worked in a nearly empty coffee shop on a night shift when you met Mr. Calloway? And is it true that you were alone with him? The manager was there too, but not at the table with you, correct? We weren't sitting together. I only served him food that he didn't ask for. He was hungry, it was cold, and you decided unilaterally to serve him a plate without consulting with your manager? My manager wanted to throw him out. I refused. How convenient. A charitable woman who casually disobeys her boss to help a stranger. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you?" Charles stood up. "Objection. Counsel is speculating." "Overruled," the judge responded. "Continue, Mr. Vance." "Ms. Reyes, did you know who Arthur Calloway was when you served him? Do you really expect us to believe you didn't recognize one of the richest men in America? He looked like a homeless man. He didn't look rich at all." "Exactly. He looked vulnerable, perfect for someone looking for an opportunity." Sarah felt the rage bubbling. "I didn't look for anything. I was just kind. And that kindness casually generated $3 billion for you." "Objection," Charles shouted. "Sustained. Mr. Vance, avoid." Insinuations. But the damage was done. The reporters scribbled furiously. The cameras captured every one of Sarah's expressions. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witnesses from both sides paraded through the stand. Psychiatrists confirmed Arthur's lucidity. Jack, the manager, testified about that night, admitting grudgingly that Sarah had acted out of pure kindness. The pharmacist who had lent her money for Lily's antibiotics spoke about her character, but the lawyers for Adam and Elena were relentless. They painted Sarah as an intelligent manipulator who had seen an opportunity and taken it. Finally, the moment for the verdict came. The judge, a woman of 60 named Martha Foster, reviewed the documents one last time before speaking. "I have exhaustively reviewed all the testimonies, documents, and evidence presented. Mr. Calloway's will is legal. It was drafted with certified full mental capacity, and there is no credible evidence of manipulation or fraud. Elena stifled a scream. Adam closed his eyes. Therefore, this court validates the will in its entirety. Ms. Sarah Reyes is the legitimate heir to Arthur Calloway's estate. The gavel hit. The verdict was final. The first days after the verdict were surreal. Sarah woke up in the hotel, hoping it had all been a dream. But Charles arrived every morning with documents to sign, decisions to make, responsibilities to assume. "We need to talk about the properties," he would say. "There are apartment buildings, commercial, offices, mansions. I don't know anything about properties. Then we will hire managers, but the final decisions are yours." It was overwhelming. Every day brought new challenges, new responsibilities. Sarah spent entire nights reading financial reports she barely understood, learning about investments, markets, strategies. Lily, for her part, adapted with the flexibility of children. She liked the hotel, the abundant food, the clean sheets. But one night she asked, "Mommy, can we go back home?" "This is our home now, honey. But I miss our house, I miss Mrs. Miller." Sarah hugged her daughter, understanding. Money could buy luxury, but it couldn't buy the simplicity of what they had lost. She made a decision. She wouldn't move into a mansion. She wouldn't live behind high walls and security guards. She bought a comfortable apartment in a normal neighborhood with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. She hired Mrs. Miller as an official nanny, paying her a dignified salary. And every Tuesday night, no matter what, she cooked soup and bread and sat with Lily to eat, remembering. Then she began to use the money, but not in the way the world expected. She didn't buy yachts or jewelry. She didn't travel to private islands or dine in 5-star restaurants. Instead, she visited the neighborhood where she had grown up. She saw abandoned buildings and turned them into community centers. She found schools without resources and equipped them completely. She spoke with working mothers, as she had been, and created free daycares with night hours. But she did something more important. She never forgot to look into the eyes of invisible people. The cleaning workers in her buildings knew her name. The security guards received raises and benefits. The janitors were treated with respect. One afternoon, she visited the coffee shop where she had worked. Jack almost fainted when he saw her enter. "Ms. Reyes, I didn't know—" "Relax, Jack. I only came to offer you something." "What?" "I bought the place, and I want you to manage it differently. Dignified wages for everyone, a real day off every week, and a fund for any employee who has emergencies." Jack blinked, confused. "Why would you do that?" "Because I remember every 12-hour shift. Every night I cried counting coins. No one should live like that." She hired lawyers not to accumulate more money, but to pursue justice. Companies that exploited workers received lawsuits. Landlords who mistreated tenants faced real consequences. She became what Arthur had hoped for. Not a rich woman, but a powerful woman who remembered what it was like to have no power. 6 months after the verdict, Sarah received a letter. It was from Elena. "I need to talk to you, please, just once, in private." Sarah hesitated, but finally accepted. They met in a neutral cafe, away from reporters and curious people. Elena arrived without lawyers, without war makeup, only with a tired face that showed her real age. They sat in silence for a full minute. "I don't know how to start," Elena finally said. "Then don't start. Just talk." Elena took a shaky breath. "I've spent these months hating you, convincing myself that you were a scammer, a manipulator, because it was easier than accepting the truth." "What truth?" "That my father was right. Adam and I, when he told us he was dying, our first concern was the money. Not him, not his pain, not his fear, just the damn money." Tears began to fall down her cheeks. "And the worst is that I didn't even realize it at the time. I thought I was being practical, efficient, but I was being monstrous." Sarah said nothing. She just listened. "I investigated everything about you. Everything. And you know what I found? A working mother who never gave up. A woman who helped strangers even when she barely could herself. Someone who deserved every dollar she received." "Your father didn't know me," Sarah said softly. "He only saw one moment, one gesture. He saw who you really were. And I have spent my whole life without seeing who I was." Elena pulled a paper from her bag. "This is a waiver of any future claim on the estate, signed and certified. I'm not going to keep fighting." You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Because I need to start living in a way my father would have respected, even if it's late, even if he is no longer here to see it. Sarah took Elena's hand over the table. It's never too late to change. How do you do it? How do you stay good with so much money? Because I remember. Every Tuesday, Lily and I eat soup and bread. To never forget what it is to be hungry. To never forget that every person I see could have been me a year ago. Eleanor nodded slowly, understanding something that words couldn't completely express. Can I ask you something? Sure. Can you forgive me? Not for the inheritance, for how I treated you, for the horrible things I said. Sarah smiled sadly. You are already forgiven, because I understand the pain of losing something. And you lost your father twice when he died, and when you realized that you never really knew him. They parted without hugs, without big reconciliations. Just two women who had learned different lessons from the same man. 1 year after inheriting the fortune, Sarah created the Arthur Callaway Foundation. Its mission was simple: see the invisible. She funded night canteens in every district of the city, open until 3 in the morning for late shift workers. She created a medical emergency fund for people without insurance. She opened free technical schools in forgotten neighborhoods. But most importantly, she trained every employee of her organizations in one fundamental principle. Look into the eyes of every person you serve. Remember, they are human beings, not cases, not numbers, not problems. The media began calling her the people's heiress. Some said it with admiration, others with sarcasm. She didn't care. She knew her work spoke louder than any headline. Lily, now 8 years old, attended a public school, not an elite private college. Sarah wanted her to grow up understanding the real world, not a golden bubble. One afternoon, while Sarah was reviewing proposals for a new community center, Lily entered her office. "Mommy, my friends ask why we don't live in a mansion." "And what do you answer them?" "That we have everything we need." Sarah left the papers and looked at her daughter. "Is that true? Do you have everything you need?" Lily thought seriously. "Yes, I have a comfortable bed, yummy food, and I have you. What else would I need?" Sarah hugged her, knowing she had raised someone who understood what really mattered. Adam, unlike Elena, never made peace. He remained bitter, blaming Sarah for his theft. But gradually his relevance diminished. Without the Callaway name backed by wealth, he discovered that his friends disappeared. The doors that had always been open closed. He ended up working in a mid-level position in a company where he had once been considered heir to an empire. It was a fall that Arthur had probably anticipated, hoping it would teach humility. He still hadn't learned the lesson. 3 years after Arthur's death, Sarah was dining in a modest restaurant with Lily when she saw something that stopped her. An older man, clearly homeless, was looking through the glass with a hungry expression. The restaurant staff shooed him away with rude gestures. Sarah stood up immediately. "Excuse me," she told the manager. "That man outside. Could he sit at my table?" The manager looked at her as if she were crazy. "Ma'am, that's a bum. He'll scare away the customers." The words echoed with a familiar and painful resonance. "If someone has a problem with a hungry human being sitting down to dinner," Sarah said with a firm voice, "then they aren't customers I respect." She went out personally and invited the man to come in. She told him to order whatever he wanted. When he finished eating and tried to pay with counted coins, Sarah rejected them softly. "Guests do not pay for kindness." The same words she had said 3 years ago. The circle was complete. Lily observed everything with intense attention. Later, at home, she asked, "Mommy, why did you do that?" "Because someone once taught me that kindness is not given expecting a reward. It's given because it's the right thing to do." "Who taught you that?" Sarah looked at the photo of Arthur she kept in her study. One of the few photos she had, found where he was smiling genuinely. "A wise man who left me more than money. He left me a lesson on how to live." The clinics offered free care. The technical schools graduated hundreds of students every year, people who had been discarded by the system and now found dignity in work. But Sarah never forgot the central lesson. Money was a tool, not an identity. When Lily turned 10, Sarah took her to the old apartment where they had lived. The building remained the same, worn but clean. They knocked on Mrs. Miller's door, who now officially worked for Sarah but had insisted on staying in her own home. "Why did you bring me here, Mommy?" Lily asked. Because I want you to remember where we come from. This 400-square-foot apartment was our home. Here I learned that happiness is not measured in feet or dollars. Were you happy here? Sarah thought honestly. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. There were nights of fear, of hunger, of tears, but there were also moments of love, of hope, of dignity. And that is what I want you to understand. Money can relieve suffering, but it cannot create character. Character is forged in the decisions you make when no one is watching. Lily absorbed the words with seriousness. Years later, a journalist asked Sarah in an interview, "Do you ever regret having accepted the inheritance?" Sarah reflected before responding. "At first, yes. I thought the money would define me, that it would change me. I was afraid of losing myself. But then I understood something that Arthur already knew. Money doesn't reveal who you are. It only amplifies what you already are. If you are greedy, you will become more greedy. If you are generous, you can be more generous. I chose to remember." Remember what? Remember every double shift, every night counting coins, every time I had to choose between my dignity and survival, and I chose both. That is what money can never buy, the memory of who you were when you had nothing. The interview went viral, not for sensationalism but for truth. Elena, who had begun working as a volunteer in one of the foundation's night canteens, saw the interview and cried. She called Sarah that night. "Thank you," she simply said. "Why?" "For showing me that it's never too late to be the person my father hoped I would be. Don't do it for him, Elena. Do it for yourself." 10 years after the death of Arthur Calloway, Sarah Reyes sat in the same cafe where she had met the lawyer who changed her life. Charles Miller, now retired but still a close friend, sat in front of her. "How do you feel?" Charles asked. "Tired, fulfilled, grateful. Arthur would be proud." "I hope so." Charles pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "There is something I never gave you. Arthur asked me to wait 10 years. He said by then you would know if you did the right thing." Sarah opened the envelope with hands that no longer trembled like that rainy night a decade ago. Inside was a letter, written with the shaky hand of a sick man, but with words of absolute clarity. "Dear Sarah, if you are reading this, it means 10 years have passed. It means you have had time to feel the weight of the money, the responsibility of power, and the loneliness that comes with both. I want you to know something. I didn't choose you because you were perfect. I chose you because you were real. In a world where everyone pretended kindness expecting a reward, you were kind without expecting anything. That is rarer than any diamond, more valuable than any fortune. My children learned how to win, but not how to matter. I taught them strategy, not humanity. That was my mistake. But you already knew what I took a lifetime to learn, that the true value of a person is not measured in what they possess, but in how they treat those who cannot give them anything in return. I don't know what you have done with the money. Maybe you created an empire. Maybe you donated it all. Maybe you found a balance. Whatever your choice, I trust it was made with the same heart that gave me back $5 on a stormy night. The money was my final test for you, but also for the world. I wanted to prove that kindness exists without a motive, that dignity survives poverty, and that real character is neither bought nor sold. Thank you for being my last lesson. Thank you for showing me that I spent my life building the wrong thing, but that there was still time to do something right. My true inheritance is not the buildings or the shares. It is the proof that people like you exist. And that is enough. With respect and eternal gratitude, Arthur Calloway." Sarah finished reading with tears running down her cheeks. She folded the letter carefully and kept it close to her heart. "What do you plan to do now, Charles asked. Sarah looked out the window. New York stretched before her, a city full of stories, of struggles, of invisible people who only needed someone to see them. The same thing I have always done. Keep remembering. Keep seeing. Keep being human. That night, like every Tuesday, Sarah and Lily sat at their kitchen table. The soup steamed in simple bowls. The bread was freshly baked. Lily, now 16 and a brilliant student with solid values, raised her bowl. "To Grandpa Arthur," she said, using the title they had adopted for the man she never met, but whose legacy lived in every decision they made. "To Arthur," Sarah repeated, "and to remembering that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems lost in the darkness." They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, surrounded not by luxury, but by something more valuable, purpose. The next day, Sarah visited the cemetery where Arthur was buried. His grave was simple, as he had asked. No ostentation, no grand monuments, just his name, his dates, and a phrase he had chosen himself. "I learned late, but I learned." Sarah placed fresh flowers and spoke in a low voice. "I did the best I could, Arthur. I don't know if it was enough, but I never forgot why you chose me. I never forgot that the money was a test, not a prize. And I think Lily is growing up understanding the same thing. So thank you, not just for the material inheritance, but for trusting that I would understand the real one." The wind moved the leaves of the nearby trees, and for a moment, Sarah felt something like peace. The Arthur Callaway Foundation continued to grow, but always maintained its fundamental principle. Every person was seen, heard, valued. The most humble workers knew Sarah's name. The beneficiaries knew they were not cases but human beings. And every person who passed through the doors of any of the Foundation's programs saw a sign with simple words, "Here, guests do not pay for kindness." Years later, when they asked her what the secret to her success was, Sarah responded with a smile. "There is no secret. There is only a choice you make every day. Are you going to see people as numbers or as human beings? Are you going to use power to control or to serve? Are you going to remember where you come from, or are you going to pretend you were always at the top? I choose to remember, always." Lily grew up and became a doctor, working in the Foundation's free clinics, not because she needed the money, but because she understood that the true legacy is not inherited, it is lived. Elena found peace working quietly in charitable causes, never seeking recognition, simply trying to make up for years of indifference. Adam never changed, dying bitter and alone, proving that some cannot see beyond their own reflection. But the story was not about them. It was about a tired woman who chose kindness when she could have chosen indifference. It was about a rich man who learned too late that he had been measuring success with the wrong ruler. It was about a simple lesson the world keeps forgetting. Wealth does not build character, it reveals it. Power does not create kindness, it only gives it amplification. And in the end, the only thing that really matters is not how much you accumulated, but how many you saw when they were invisible, how many you fed when they were hungry, and how many you treated as human when the world treated them as nothing. Sarah Reyes never forgot that she was once the invisible woman behind the counter, and that memory, more than any fortune, was the true inheritance she passed on to her daughter, and that her daughter would pass on to the world. Because kindness given without expectation is never wasted. It only multiplies silently, changing lives one bowl of hot soup at a time.